Howdy everyone, Andy here from Team Completed It. Just wanted to give a big shout out to our supporters and sponsors over at My Hero UK. My Hero UK is a one-stop shop app for all your comic book needs. Buy, sell, trade, amazing service over at My Hero UK. Head on over to your app store, type in My Hero UK, download the app, and the boys will take care of the rest. If you want to check them out, go to www.myherouk.co.uk. Thanks for the support, boys, and enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to Completed It. I am your host, Andy Burrows, and as you can see in the top left-hand side of my screen is one of my illustrious co-hosts, and it's the guru of Completed It. It's the Yoda himself, as always. Neil, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, sir. And yourself?
I am super excited for this one, my friend. I am doing very well. We have the distinct honor of having someone who is renowned through the acting world, through TV, through film. He was the first ever guest star of The Simpsons, starred in such shows as Boston Legal, Kings of Queens, played Chandler Bing's boss in Friends, spanning over 217 shows, various movies, various TV shows. I am very honored and humbled to say our guest today is none other than Sam McMurray. Sam, welcome to Completed It. How are you, sir?
Thank you so much, Andy. It's good to be here.
It's
Figured out our time
awesome.
difference, right?
Yeah, we figured out the time difference in the end. I might, yeah, I need to get more fingers and toes count backwards, forwards.
No, you know what? I was in New York maybe when we started this discussion.
Yeah,
So that
I think
added to the complications. Yeah.
Sam, we're really honored to have you on the show, my friend. Thank you so
My
much
pleasure.
for taking the time. Sam, for someone that's been in so many shows, like I mentioned at the start there, and I left out things like the ER. You were in an episode of that. You've done The Sopranos, Dinosaurs, which was huge in the 90s.
I loved it.
Especially over here in the UK. Sam, just tell
Really?
us. I cannot tell you how big that show was in the UK.
You
It
have the
was
record? You have the
yeah,
CD? I rapped on the
absolutely.
CD, you know.
Oh my God.
Uh,
Sam, just tell us a little bit about the industry, though, because from when you first started to now, just tell us about how you got into the industry. There must be so many differences from when you first got into acting, and now we sit here in
oh, yeah.
2020, we sit here in 2026 now with Netflix and Disney Plus. And I think you look around at the actors you've got nowadays, and some of them you're like, oh, how did you get your start? And they're like, I was on YouTube. You're thinking,
Right.
wow,
Right.
just tell us like your start into the industry of the world of acting.
Well, my parents were both actors. My mother was from Seattle originally, and she came to New York in the 30s, right? She was a very bright gal. She went to Berkeley, Cal, and graduated when she was 19, which was very young. She comes to New York, I don't know when, mid 30s, I guess. And it's funny because we were talking about this, or I've been with friends of a certain age or a different generation. For instance, my oldest daughter is an actress, and she lives in Brooklyn. And things have changed remarkably. In my generation, I think we were quite fortunate because, of course, there were only three networks. Although, you know, when I went to LA, I was on one of the first Fox shows, which was the Tracy Ullman show, which ran for 3.5 seasons, I believe. Anyhow, but so my mother comes to New York, and in those days, there was no off-Broadway scene. But I'll try not to ramble too much, but my mind is so discursive, you'll have to forgive me.
Oh, you're good.
But in those days, if you were cast in a Broadway show, which was really the only, show in New York, they had 5 days in which they could cut you loose without cause. They didn't like your hair color or
Wow.
something. So my mother said, so everybody just walked on, tippy toes
Mm.
for 5 days. But, then they made their way. My dad, actually, who was quite tall for those days, he was 6'3", which is, I don't know, would be like 6'9" now. He came to New York because he wanted to be a dancer, which was interesting. He was from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and he was quite an athlete and a basketball player and track star and so forth. But he wanted to go to the big city. So he was a little younger than my mother. They didn't know each other at the time. But he comes to New York and I don't know, he was working as like a superintendent in an apartment building. He gets married to a very well known dancer, actually, a woman named Beatrice Seckler. And I don't know if you know who Jose Limon was, but back in the day, he was quite well known, like Martha Graham and so forth. And she was one of the principal dancers. Anyway, so the war happens, and my dad goes to enlist, and he's very skinny. But I said he was 6'3", maybe 140 pounds. And they sent him away. And he told me because he was too skinny. And then he tried to enlist again. And he said, well, I had a bunch of milkshakes and ate a banana. And they took me. But there was more to it than that. Because, and this is my father's side of the family is rather spotty. And he was the youngest of three boys. And the eldest was named Lloyd Elmer Jr., Lloyd Elmer McMurray Jr. And at one point, because I'm still in touch with my cousin Frank, who lives in the San Francisco area, and turns out that my grandfather, who my father barely knew because he died when my dad was, I think, anywhere from 5 to 8, depends on who you ask, nobody. But he had been in the Spanish-American War in the Philippines. So we're talking about the 19th century, and that's my grandfather. And he was what they call a Mustang. He was enlisted he was an enlisted man, but he got bumped up and became a lieutenant. But he died of tuberculosis. And then my stepmother later tells me, your father wasn't turned away because he was too skinny, it's because they saw spots on his lungs. Because apparently he'd been infected. Anyway, they take him. He goes over to the UK. He was in East Anglia, I think. And he was co-pilot of B-17s. And those stories I'm still trying to, parse because they're remarkable. He does his 28 missions. He goes to Liverpool because they fitted out the Queen Mary as a troop ship in those days. This is 44, I guess. And he goes into a pub in Liverpool and he wakes up 3 days later because he'd been
Sounds about right.
Typical
Liverpool.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Well, they had this whole operation going, and of course they rolled him. But they were kind enough, I guess, to put him on the troop ship. So, anyhow, I don't think he never went back. Although I think he had a good time when he was in England. I think he was actually having an affair with this young gal, or not so young gal, who was married to a Tommy. But the guy had been, like in North Africa for 5 years. And apparently, when he came back to the UK, he was kicking with the other foot, shall we say? Anyhow, so that's my story. And then he decides to become an actor. So he becomes an actor. He meets my mother. They had both been married, but never mind. And they get together like 1950 and so forth. But this time was also a time of political peril. This was during the Hollywood blacklist, which of course reached New York as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see On the Waterfront, for instance, really that is the original intention, I should say, of that movie is to justify being a stool pigeon. Because Elia Kazan, who had been a very friendly and left-leaning person, was told that if he didn't change his mind about being an unfriendly witness in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee, and stop me if you know this one or you don't, he changed his mind and he became a friendly witness, as did Bud Schulberg, who was the son of a big movie studio. And he wrote, and anyway, so the whole thing was a justification of a stool pigeon. I was just thinking about this the other day because I saw On the Waterfront again not long ago. And what was brilliant about Kazan was that he recognized early on that it wasn't a big blockbuster movie, tearing up, the unions who had been, gutted and were corrupt and so forth. He realized as soon as he saw the dailies, or the first day he saw Eve Marie Saint and Brando together, that it was a love story. And she's remarkable. I met her. She's 101. I met her a few years ago with Carl Reiner, in fact, and she couldn't have been nice. And she knew my mother because my mother and she were both at the Actors Studio in the early 50s, and before that, in fact. And my mother's name was Jane Hoffman, to give her full credit. My dad was Richard McMurray. Anyhow, she couldn't have been nicer, and she's still going. And funnily enough, I was watching the 2-part documentary on Mel Brooks. Have you seen it? Do you get it over there?
No, we haven't got it over here
we
yet.
haven't got it.
Well, anyway, it's Judd, who I worked with on, come on, Sam, Freaks and Geeks. I'm doing quite well, although I did have a test for my mental acuity, and I still haven't heard. Anyway,
it's lost in the post.
so so I'm just I just wanted to play basketball. That's when I did a lot of that. But I didn't know where I went to college, where to go to college, and I wound up in St. Louis, of all places, at a very good school called Washington University, and I fell in love when I went when I was 17. I was a year ahead of myself, but anyway, once I fell out of love in my sophomore year, I woke up and I was doing 3 plays at once, which was interesting because I hadn't really done it in high school. But of course, I grew up. Well, I had all these aunts and uncles who were, actors and people in the business and so forth. So it was something that I knew very well, at least socially. So I started to do that. And then I remember when I was 20, I got a job at the John Drew Theater, which is out in East Hampton, Long Island, and it was run by Edward Albee. And my mother had done The American Dream with Edward Albee. She was always mommy in that. And she also done Sandbox. Anyway, so I was a little bit of a Nepo baby. And they hired me and Griffin Dunn. Griffin was a few years younger than me. And we were probably the only two straight guys in the company. But I mean, so it was a great time for me. Griffin had to run a bit, but I didn't. So anyway, so that's when I began. When I was about 20 or so, I think I'm going to do this. So I get out of school, and this was 69 to 73. And in 72, they initiated, or 71, they initiated the lottery system. And by that time, I built up my file because I wasn't going to Vietnam. No fucking way, right? So, and my dad, who had been a war hero, said, no, you're not going. And he actually drove me around because I came out to visit him, and we went to various, or one place in particular, which was like a center for how to be how to avoid the draft. Unlike, it was as much a political statement as anything out. There was nothing wrong with my feet like our president. Anyhow, and then I got the number of the second year of the lottery, and I was exempt because it was fair how 222, I remember. Anyhow, so I get through with college, and now I'm not going to go into the Army. And so I start to, make the rounds. And I remember there was a wonderful agent named Stark Hesseltine. Yes, that was really his name. And he had discovered a young actor in the late 50s named Robert Redford and put him into Barefoot in the Park, which was a Broadway play at the time. So I go see a photographer, and he takes a shine to me, and he says, hang on a second. And he calls up Stark Hesseltine. And meanwhile, I'm like 22 years old, and I don't know jack, from any of this. He says, I got an actor you should meet. Okay, so I go meet Stark Hesseltine, who was with a big agency at the time. I think it was called, I may be wrong, it's called ICM. I can't remember, but they were like William Morris. They're huge. And he says, well, I want you to do a scene from Barefoot in the Park. So, okay. So that's how he tested everybody, including Chris Reeve, who we later represented,
Wow.
So I didn't know anybody in New York because I had just been in college for 4 years. I mean, except for, guys in the neighborhood. That didn't count. But somebody said, well, Katie Heflin is living in Jack Warden's apartment in Sheridan Square. And I was still living in Greenwich Village at the time. I had my first apartment there, which was truly a rat trap. But I call her up, and she says, sure. Now, Katie Heflin was the daughter of the actor Van Heflin. This is all becoming like incredibly incestuous as we go on. And my dad had done a play with Van Heflin called A Case of Libel, and he won a rather prestigious award, which I have, called the Clarence Derwin Award, which is given to a featured actor in a Broadway play. And my father was quite wonderful, and I saw it and, tore me up. Anyhow, so I do this scene with her. We rehearse it, and I later met Jack Warden many years later. You know who Jack Warden was, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I know Jack.
I met him in a cigar store about 15 years ago, and we just sat and talked for about 3 hours. Anyhow, brilliant guy and a great actor, I think. Anyway, so I go up, I do the scene for Stark, and he looks at Katie, who was just pretty much sort of, tagging along, and he says, I don't have anything for you, but I have something for you. And that's how I got my start. I was very fortunate in that respect.
Wow.
And he sent me out for things and so forth. And then I was with him for quite some time. He formed his own smaller agency after a while, and I went over there with him. And then there was a young agent there named David Liebhart, and he and I hit it off. And he moved over to another agency, and I went with him, which is, no harm done, nobody's feeling got hurt, and and things started to happen a bit. My problem was in whatever early 80s and so forth was that I was working quite a good deal, but I was doing all this regional theater. And then on my off day, which would be a Monday, because theaters be dark on that day, I'd run after commercials or voiceover stuff. And I did a bit of it, I was never, what do I want to say? I was never a regular in terms of commercials. And I kind of hated it, but that's where you made the money. Anyhow, so banging along, and then I meet my now ex-wife, I had seen her on a television commercial. This is like 82, 83. And she was brilliant. I mean, she was very pretty, quite beautiful. She had short blonde hair, and it was all like this. And it's just wall-to-wall copy, and she's looking right into the lens, and I was taken aback, Anyway, then I meet her at an agent's Christmas party, and this is 83. John Goodman, who I'd worked with, I had done Raising Arizona with, and a bunch of people were there and so forth. And we were all, probably doing things that we shouldn't have done in terms of, chemicals and booze and like that. But it was a fun time, and I was like 31 years old. So, I'll never die, right? Anyway, I fell in love with her immediately, and we got married. And we had two beautiful girls. And for that, I'm eternally grateful, because they're the reason for me getting out of bed in the morning. And as I said, my older daughter is a beautiful actress, and she's still, she's having a tough time because things have changed so much, but she's hanging on, and she's trying, and she's got a straight gig, which, she doesn't want particularly, but it pays off. She went to Lambda. After she graduated she was at Boston Conservatory of Music, beautiful singer. Anyway, she went to Lambda and loved it, actually. Almost stayed in England because she loved London so much. It's funny, I have a picture of her at the Globe.
Oh, nice.
The Globe.
Oh, yeah. I go past it most days.
So the Globe Theater, was basically engineered by an American. Oh, come on. He's actually fictionalized in Once Upon a Time in America, as he was his name is Sam, and his daughter's name is Zoe. This is where age creeps up on me, or slams me in the head. Sam Wanamaker, and Zoe Wanamaker is his daughter. You know her, wonderful actress, right? She works both sides. She switched from Brit to American at a moment's notice. But Sam Wanamaker was actually the man who, I don't know if he didn't actually build it with his own hands, but he engineered the rebuilding or the building of the Globe. Anyhow, so it's interesting. I was watching this two-part documentary on Mel Brooks last night, and Judge, not Reinhold. Come on, Sam. I worked with him on Freaks and Geeks. Lovely, lovely guy, and he's interviewing me the whole time. So. And when I was doing the Tracy Ullman show, I'm sorry if I'm going a little bit sideways.
You're good.
But when I'll try to tie it together. We come out in 86 because, as I said, the work was here. And I was tired of driving up on I-95, going to Connecticut all the time, and then driving back for a fast $400 a week, which in 1985 was not much money yet, even then. So, but we said, we got to go. And I'd been out to LA to work and stuff like that, and even gone out for what they call pilot season, which invariably was, 3 months of banging your head against a wall. But I come out to LA and I start to work immediately. In fact, I think the first thing I auditioned for, I got, which was a show with Lonnie Anderson, right?
No.
And I can't take this right now. Sorry. That's a friend of mine in Terry Hoyos, who I did Costello with. Anyway, so the first thing I auditioned for was, what was it called? Doesn't matter. Anyway, but Lonnie was lovely. And Jack Elam was on the show, right? And Jamie Cromwell was on the show. And to tie it all together to my earlier things, I'm talking to this young woman who was engaged to Jamie Cromwell, and her name was Julie Cobb. And I said, "You're not related to Lee J. Cobb, are you?" She said, "That's my father." Now, Lee J. Cobb was one of the worst offenders in terms of the blacklist days, if you're still with me.
Mm-hmm.
So he had been called in to testify in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee, and he became a friendly witness. He even named his ex-wife to the committee. And I don't know what you know about those days,
Whoops.
the blacklist, but this was basically a method of making you grovel, because they had the names of everybody, because they had the lists of all the people who had, been to meetings for the Communist Party, whether or not they, enrolled or not with the CP. My mother had been to those meetings, but they were never able to subpoena her because there were people in the neighborhood. It was like a watch committee, and they would call and they say, "Don't go home." Because they knew that there was a woman named Scotty who was a process server, and she was well known to the people in the neighborhood. And at one point, apparently, I don't remember this, but I was like 2 or 3. Madeline Guilford, who was the wife of Jack Guilford. You know who Jack Guilford was? Cocoon and all that stuff. Funny thing happened on the way to the farm. Very close to my parents. Madeline calls up my mother and says, "Don't go home. Call Dick." That's my dad, who was at the dentist. All this is sort of weirdly tangled together. And the dentist was somebody my father had met during the war when he went back to the States, because he had to fly this dentist around in order for the dentist to get his pay or whatever. And he became the family dentist for many years. So calls up my dad. He has the car. And we had a car in New York in those days, which is really, an indication of how long ago that was. And we hid out in Connecticut. I have no memory of it, but, that's the story. And I'm sticking to it. So anyway, so we're all sort of, tied up in the House Un-American Activities Committee. And that was really a bad time. Luckily for actors in New York, Broadway did not adhere to the doctrine of blacklisting actors who were considered pro-left or red or pink or whatever it was, right? Whereas in the movies, with the exception of Daryl Zanuck, the one Gentile of all the producers, because all the others bowed down to House Un-American Activities Committee, and so like Larry Parks, like Sam Wanamaker, all these people who had been, stars around the way up, they were basically blocked. They could not work anymore, unless they named names, as they call it. There's a great book. I'll just make this a plug, and I have no standing in it, but there's a wonderful book by a guy named Victor Navasky called Naming Names. And it really spells out the whole reason and the weirdness of the House Un-American Activities Committee. Anyway, so, the joke was, when I was born, I didn't say mommy or daddy. I said Fifth Amendment. That was it. Because that's what most people, with the exception of Pete Seeger, did. Pete Seeger and John Henry Falk and one other. They took the First Amendment. And they won many, many years later. They won, this huge lawsuit against the government. Anyway, but now we're in the same shitter with what's going on in Minneapolis. It's just,
Oh, yeah, don't.
Head splitting.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Anyhow, so we go out to LA and I start to work immediately. And I did that. And then I did my next job. I also auditioned and got right away. So it was like, oh, this is so easy, was Hill Street Blues, which was in its final season. But I had worked with Dan Travanti doing the sequel to Adam, which was shot in Houston. So I knew him a bit, and I knew some of the other folks. My friend Bruce Weitz was a regular on it. And I knew Torian Black and maybe Charlie Hayden. I knew a couple. Anyway, so I get it. And I remember going to the set, which was at CBS Radford, which has just been closed down, sadly. And I was disappointed because I so believed in the show. I wanted it to be a precinct, but it wasn't. Anyhow. And so it all seemed great and so forth. But, and then we were waiting to have a baby, Hannah Jane McMurray. And I landed on the Tracy Ullman show.
Wow.
And Tracy had enamored Jim Brooks. And he saw stuff of hers from the UK, and he said, let's build a show around her. And there was her and Julie Kavner, who was friends with Brooks from having done Rhoda, and Danny Castellaneta, who they had seen in Chicago, because Danny was brilliant. Of course, he's, now Homer Simpson, and he can buy and sell us many times over. And Joe Malone, who was pretty much a dancer, but also acted on the show. And then there were a couple of other people they weren't happy with. So I get hired for the 5th episode of the whole series, and they liked me. And 2 weeks later, because we were on hiatus after that episode, they called me and I said, "You're going to be a regular?" I said, "Great." And my first episode was with a young actor, 17 years old, named Matthew Perry.
Wow.
And I'm like struck immediately by how good he is. I was like, he's just got, the stuff.
Got it. Yeah.
So I can tell this story, and I'll try not, I got to name the director. So there was an actor named Ted Bessel, who was on a show called That Girl, played Marlo Thomas's boyfriend. And he was quite a charming actor. And his best friend was Jim Brooks. So Ted gets named as the director of the Tracy Ullman Show. And for whatever reason, when Maddie comes on the show, Ted did not like him. Didn't like him at all. But Matt was 17 years old, but he had real aplomb, and he hung in there, and he did great. I'm not sure if I should tell you the rest of the story, but the hell with it. So, because Ted has passed on since then. So a couple of years later, maybe more than a couple of years, Matt gets what do I want to call it? He's not a regular, but he has an arc on this new show, which is also Jim Brooks's doing, called Sibs. I did a couple of them. And a wonderful actress named Margaret Colum was on it, and Marsha Mason and Jamie Gertz. Anyway, so Matty lands this job, and it's salvation for him, because he's eating ramen every night. But he goes in there and he goes, shit, the director is none other than Ted Bessel. Oh, well. So, and I don't know why Ted had a hard-on for him, but he did. So, but, he tells me the story later when I'm doing Friends. Says, whatever Ted says, I'll say yes to. Okay. So he gets through the morning, and he comes back after lunch, and some, PA walks up to him, production assistant, and says, "Oh, dude, they told me to tell you you're fired."
Oh.
Like, boom. Lowered the boom on him. So Matty's devastated. He goes home. Ted calls him up that night. I have to tell this in toto, because I like Ted very much personally, but whatever. Actually, I'm good friends with Tim Busfield, who's been in the news for all the wrong reasons lately. Although it looks like the tide has turned. They released him on his own recognizance. There's no bail, no nothing, because this whole thing is horseshit, quite honestly. Anyway, and Tim was married to a good friend of mine, Melissa Gilbert, who I did a series with that Alan McEwen produced. I'm getting a little sideways here. And Alan was Tracy Ullman's husband, who was known in the UK as a Barrow Boy TV producer, which pissed him off, because he was, he's an East Ender, and he had actually been Richard Burton's hairstylist. Okay. So to finish the story, you can cut this together, I'm sure. It'll all happen. So poor Matty gets canned. I was like, shit. So he goes on, Friends, boom, big hit. And I knew a lot of these people, because I knew Courtney socially, and I knew Jennifer. I'd gone to New York with her when I was doing a series called Likely Suspects. And she was on a show. She was a redhead at the time, called The Edge, I think. Anyway, with Wayne Knight, who was an old friend from New York. But he does Friends, and now it's a big. And I go on for the 3rd season. I play his boss, and he has. I got to tell you the story. He said, "Okay." So he goes home that night, and he's devastated. And Ted calls him at home, says, "Listen, kid, you got to trust me on this one. It's not going to work out, okay? Just trust me on this, okay? Got to trust me on this. Not going to work. Yeah, okay." And he's drugged majorly. But then he lands on Friends, and they get to the 2nd season, and they pass around a piece of paper with all the potential directors for the show. And it lands on Matty's lap, and there's Ted Bessel's name. And Matty says, "You got to tell Ted Bessel, Matty Perry said, you got to trust me on this one. It's not going to work out." So one of the rare instances of an actor's justified revenge, shall we say.
Karma strikes.
So And it was I did the show with Maddie, and then I did another one um, after I was already doing King of Queens, and that
Patrick
was fine. It
O'Boyle.
was never as good as the first episode. Then I did the last year. I did one, and at that time I was having some health issues, which left me as diabetic. Anyway, but I go on the set, and by then I was really skinny. I was like 140 pounds, and I was doing King of Queens at the same time. On the set, and Courtney's like, "Oh, hi, hey, you look great," which of course I did not. Anyway, we got through that, and as you can see, I put the weight back on. So I'd done all that. And I had my own series, which I adored, called Likely Suspects, which only ran for half a season, I think, on Fox. And then I went and did League of Their Own, which also ran for half a season. Excuse me. And Penny Marshall, who I'd known a little bit because she was hanging around when we were doing the Tracy Ullman show. And she came up to me at one point and she said, "I'm going to do this movie, and you worked with Barry Levinson, Barry Sonnenfeld." She didn't get it wrong. I did. And Barry had shot, Raising Arizona, which I had done when I was still living in New York. But that was what triggered the move for me and my wife to come out to California. And I worked with Barry later. He was the director on Addams Family Values. And I did another thing for him. Anyway, I like Barry, but, a bit of a kvetch. But she said, "You like him?" I said, "Yeah, I think he's fine." Well, they hated each other. I don't know why, but I mean, he did a fine job. He did Big and so forth, with Tom, which was great. Interestingly, I did the TV pilot of Big, which didn't go. And I was the father of the Tom Hanks character. And the guy who was playing the Tom Hanks character in the pilot hated it and kept saying, "Oh, they're going to fire me." I said, "Well, why don't you shut the fuck up? And we'll get done with this and you'll get paid and then do whatever." And this guy actually became a very successful playwright. And I can't think of his name right now. Anyway, so that story doesn't have as good of an ending as the Matt Perry one did, but I'm sticking to that. It's funny. I was talking to Richard Cox. You know who that is? Wonderful actor. And he and I grew up together. And Richard was in that too, that pilot with Darren McGavin played the boss. Why can't I? The playwright's name, he wrote a sequel to the Lorraine Hansberry, Sign in Sidney Brustein's Window.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big hit. I can't remember the name of that. And he's written other stuff since then. But I guess he was right. He wasn't right for the Tom Hanks role. But, interestingly, when I did League of Their Own, Tom directed an episode. And I was playing the Tom Hanks character. And Penny had told me, apparently, I didn't know this, but when she was first doing Big, Robert De Niro was the lead. Oh. And then there was no animosity around, but he had something else and he had to drop out. So then she calls up Tom, who she knew, and Tom comes on and does Big, which, of course, he did well with. But every time Penny would make a suggestion, she told me, Tom would say, "Oh, is that what Bob would do?" So when Tom comes on and directs an episode, and I would go, "Sorry, Tom, is that what you would do?" Anyway, lovely guy. And we became friends and so forth. But the series, unfortunately, because I loved it, didn't go further, as they said. Partly, I think, because it was very expensive, So, but that was, when was that? 94, thereabouts. Anyhow, and in the meantime, I just keep plugging along and, just character actor, we'll work for food, that kind of stuff.
Wow, it's incredible. That's incredible. Sam, you mentioned the late, great Matthew Perry there.
I did.
What was it like working on such a hit show like Friends? I mean, it must have been, like you said, you went in season 3 and the show
was a hit.
It was really rolling by then. A quick funny story, like when some of me and my friends do it now, what lads are like when they're out in the bars and stuff. Anytime someone walks past someone, I slap them on the arse and go bing, and it gets a laugh. And if people, there's certain people in the bar that might not watch the show, and they're like, "What are these crazy guys doing?" It gets a giggle every time I do it, and me and my friends have watched Friends. But what was it like for you, Sam, going into work with Courtney and Jennifer and all them guys and girls in such an established show?
I
You
didn't
only
know
in it
Matty
3
LeBlanc, but
episodes
I
as well.
absolutely fell in love with him. Just a great guy. And Matty Perry was, he was having his personal turmoil, if you will. But he was always terrific towards me and so forth, as was Jennifer, as is Courtney. I haven't seen Jennifer in a long time. I just blanked, the blonde gal. Doink. Anyhow.
Lisa Kudrow.
Thank you. Who is conceivably the most talented of all of them. She's a terrific actress. Anyway, but although I think Jennifer is a wonderful actress, I mean, truly, and I had seen her from time to time and stuff, and I still do. I haven't seen her socially in a long time. I saw Courtney not terribly long ago. Anyway, never mind. But I don't know. I mean, I was feeling my oats. I was in acting shape. So I came on the show, and I knew Matty, of course, and we get together and so forth. And I remember doing the table read, and I just said "bing," and got a big laugh, and of course, it stayed, and the slapping him on the ass and so forth. And then I came back and did another one, and they had a gal playing my wife, and I don't know if they kept it or not, but she had lived at one point when she sees him at dinner, slapping him on the ass, going "bing,"
And was that the tennis episode when you had to play tennis?
The tennis episode, yeah. And but they had so much money at this point, because I don't remember what season it was, 5 or 6. They didn't rent a tennis court. They actually took over a studio and painted a tennis court.
Oh,
amazing. Anyway, and Matty was a good tennis player. But unfortunately, he and Courtney were both converging on a ball, and he hit her in the nose with his racket and just beat the crap out of himself until everybody, and she was okay. Everybody said, because they really liked one another. I mean, they all loved one another, I think. The only one I didn't know really was Schwimmer. I mean, hi, how you doing? But LeBlanc I would see from time to time, and he just makes me laugh. And he was doing a movie when I did the first one. And he was flying from London like on a Thursday night, and they'd give him the blocking, and he'd learn the lines, and he'd do it in one day and then turn around and go back. And this happened for a number of weeks. It was like a sci-fi movie, but it was a reboot of it. Yes.
Lost in Space, yeah.
Thank you. And he just used to make me laugh. He is a very, very... And the funny thing about that show was that when it first began, I would say he was maybe the weakest. But they figured out a way to write for him. And then he became the funniest, I think, Anyway, so this is a wonderful show. I love doing it and so forth. And it's, it's rare you get on something like that where it's like, well, how much is this going to cost us? Well, $12 million. Okay, let's do, whatever. I'm making it up.
Yes.
But there's that kind of thing. It was like, holy Christ. Anyway, and then they were all, they banded together, and they all got paid the same amount of money after the first season or something. But I love doing that. And it's funny, I had dinner with my friend Rick Marotta the other night. And he did the music, thanks to me, in part, for Everybody Loves Raymond. And Ray came around, Ray Romano, and we were talking. And I said, I remember seeing you and Kevin James trying to qualify for, the Pro-Am at Pebble Beach. And they missed out by one stroke. And I remember doing... King of Queens that week, and I had seen it, and I come in the next night, I see Kevin. I said, that was the saddest thing I've ever seen, because Kevin was totally torn up by the fact that they didn't make the cut. That was a fun show too, and I always thought it was, I don't want to say ill-regarded or anything but I always thought it was better than the critics thought of in terms of
it ran for a hell of a long time.
It ran for a hell of a long time.
I know you've done about 17, 18 episodes,
something like that.
Played his boss.
That was a sort of an unfortunate circumstance, and they wanted me to be a regular in the beginning, but I was doing something else. But I knew Michael Whitehorn because Michael, who was the co-creator of it, had written on the Tracy Ullman Show. But not as a staff member. But they would, he would get the occasional thing to write, and he would write it. And he wrote one of my favorite sketches on the Tracy Ullman Show, in which I played a catcher. And Dan Castellaneta is having a crisis of nerves on the mound. And they had us all togged out in L.A. Angel stuff. And I played him Latino, which I don't know if I could do now. And they gave me a little thumb piece and everything, and I did it with an accent. And it was one of my favorite sketches ever. Anyhow, but anyway. So, but yeah, during the Tracy Ullman Show, of course, I just have to say this parenthetically. In those days, Simpsons was just beginning. And it was essentially, they used little incidental cuts on the show, like 12 seconds, 15 seconds, of Simpsons and so forth. And that was all Jim Brooks. He uncovered Matt Groening's thing, which ran in the LA Weekly, which was a free paper in those days. So then he decides to make this thing. And Dan was brilliant. Of course, we would do these things. They would say, do you have 15 minutes before lunch and come into the audio booth and just record some wild lines for us? And we would do that. And then they said, well, we're going to series. And I actually did the first episode. And I had an odd sort of accolade.
First person to guest star in The Simpsons, right?
Exactly. And then did I do another one? I think I did, where I sang. And it was a character I created on the Tracy Ullman Show, which recurred, called Gulliver Dark, who was sort of a combination of, Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck, and I got to sing, which was, and the last episode of the show, actually, they had me sing Sexual Healing. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, you want me to lampoon Marvin Gaye? I mean, first I have to be able to sing it, even, half-assedly. Because, I'd done other things. I did, the first one I did was Kool and the Gang, Later, Paula Abdul, who was the choreographer, I ran into her. She said, I saw the episode last night. I was with Kool, and they really liked you on ladies' night.
Absolutely incredible.
It was really fortunate, Anyway.
I can imagine. Neil, I know you got a couple of questions, my man. We've got about 10, 15 minutes left of the episode. But
I'm sorry. I'm just babbling.
No, you're good, brother.
Please.
No, keep going. We can go as long. Don't worry. Go on, Neil.
On your bike. There we go.
Well, the only question I had is, looking at your resume and the sheer number of films and TV shows you've been on, you are in almost everything. You're in two of my favorite Christmas movies of all time. You're in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation and in Klaus. You have done The Boondocks. You've done Scandal.
Right.
Grey's Anatomy, Breaking Bad, ER, Hey Arnold. You've done Batman, the animated series. You're in Class Act. You're in Who's the Boss, 21 Jump Street. How does it feel knowing that you are part of some of the most beloved and important films and TV shows of the last 40 years, the last 50 years even?
Wow. Well, I'd have to say thanks. At the time, I'm just showing up, particularly for voiceover, for cartoon stuff like Hey Arnold, or I did love dinosaurs. It was so much fun to do.
Because you're going how popular that show was.
Right. But you were dubbing a puppet. It wasn't difficult, shall we say.
Yeah.
And of course, the one who really had to work was Kevin. Come on, Sam, who did the baby. Because he built the puppets as well.
Not the mama.
Brilliant. And he was on the set. I was never on the set. I just go into ADR, and there was a guy named Dave who was from the UK. And he kind of talked like he had his thumb in his mouth, but he would try to do me. And so we would take long pauses because I go, hey, Pally boy, hey, and he'd go, hey, Pally boy, and then I would replace it.
Sounds like me.
Very sweet guy. But anyway, that was, I'd like to be able to look back and say, gee, I did a lot, but, you still have to show up like most actors do. There is maybe in the UK, there's a bit more respect paid to somebody who's been doing it for 52 years, like I have. Maybe not. And maybe, I don't deserve it. Maybe I'm happy to have the work and so forth. And,
I know you deserve it.
Well, but what happened during COVID was it really turned Screen Actors Guild upside down. Because back in my parents' day, once you were vested, that's it. End of story. Now you have to work and make X number of new dollars every year in order to qualify for their health benefits. So, for instance, in 24, and I was going back and forth to New York at the time. I had a sublet then. I did Law and Order, and then I was flying myself back out to do, Platonic. And then I go back to New York and finish up Law and Order, which took forever for some reason. And then I came back out and I did NCIS, which I had done 15 years before, but it was so long ago. They said you can come back as somebody else. Okay. So then they keep talking. Now they're talking all this shit like you could recur. I went, I'm just sitting on my ass. Let's go. Anyhow. So in 24, I made enough to qualify again for year 25 for Screen Actors Guild health benefits, which was Anthem, as it's called, which is not a very well liked outfit because, when I go see a doctor, they go, oh, Anthem. So this year I'm back on Medicare and I have to get AARP to pay for, extra and stuff like that. So it is what it is. But back in the day, as I said, when my parents, were, and, even until whatever it was, 2023, once you're vested, you're vested. You don't have to earn more money. But I'm not retired, and I will never retire because actors don't retire. They just age out a little bit, And it's very nice when I hear those things, or sometimes it'll be quite random. I'll be walking down the street and somebody will say something nice, and, that's great. I love all of that stuff. And it's interesting, too, because you were mentioning some other credits, which wouldn't necessarily pop to mind. Who said, well, you did a Hey Arnold. I went, oh, yeah. I remember doing Hey Arnold. And everything I say is parenthetical. But I remember meeting Lou Rawls. And I had grown up with Lou Rawls's The Live album, which was not really live. It was just a bunch of his friends in the studio making noise and clapping. But he was so nice. And I was so thrilled to meet him. Couldn't have been nicer. Anyway, things like that are really exciting, But I was there. I was watching the Mel Brooks doc, and it's worth seeing because he's 99 years old, right? In 1961 or 62, I already knew. I was 10 in 62. I had been listening to the 2,000-Year-Old Man. And I knew it chapter and verse, right? My mother did a play with Anne Bancroft by Bertolt Brecht called Mother Courage. This was on Broadway. Jerome Robbins directed it. And it didn't run, but it was very sort of critically, acclaimed. So for the closing night, my parents had the closing night party at our house, which was in Greenwich Village. And I said, I have to meet Mel Brooks. So, because he and Anne were going together. They weren't married at the time. So they wake me up. I go sit in the kitchen. I'm like, 9, 10 years old in my pajamas. And Mel Brooks comes in. And I go, hey, how are you? And he's like, Howie does a little tap. How you doing? And then he leaves. And of course, in my telling of it years later, I said, oh, he spent an hour with me. Of course. But then he did the Tracy Ullman show. And I said, you probably don't remember me. He said, no, I don't. But I know you now. Blah, 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 blah. And he couldn't have been sweeter, And there's a clip in the Mel Brooks doc with Tracy and he. And I remember doing the sketch with him, and he comes on, he makes his entrance as a producer, and he gets a big hand from the live audience. And instead of doing the scene, it's like Yiddish theater. He goes right down front and goes, hello, everybody.
Wow.
Which, you don't really do because, we're shooting it for the home audience. Anyway, couldn't have been sweeter. And it's nice because why can't I think, I want to say Judge Reinhold, but I'm wrong. The guy who created the show that you love so well, Freaks and Geeks. Reinhold. No, not Judge Reinhold. He does the interviewing on this thing. He's a terrific guy. Anyway, and Freaks and Geeks was also one of my favorites. And he just offered it to me. And he said, at the end of 9 episodes, my wife and I split because I've been cheating. And he says, I want you and Sam Levine, who I'm still friends with, to play playing my son. We're going to do this, one of the things will be this divorced father and you and your relationship with your son. I thought that'd be great. And unfortunately, NBC at the time had the World Series. And the show started off very strong, but they got bumped because the World Series was on. So, and I'll remember his name at some point. The guy who was the head of NBC at the time, because I knew him at Fox, and it's not coming to me. But anyway, he told our fearless leader, he said, if this show, why can't I think of his name? He's done all these big movies and
stuff. Is it
stuff.
Paul Feig?
Huh?
Paul Feig?
No. Paul was his partner on Freaks and Geeks. Yes, but this other one, anyway. I want to say Judd. Is that right?
Judd
Anyhow, sorry.
Apatow?
Yes, Judd Apatow. Thank you. Watch the doc if you can. So anyway, so he said, not Garth Ancier, maybe it was run. Doesn't matter. The guy was running NBC. If you get an 8, we'll continue with the rest of the order. We got an 8 exactly. And true to his word, we finished up the 9 episodes and so forth. And it was a lovely show to do, like Linda Cardellini, I just adore, everybody was terrific. And, Paul, who passed away, oh shit, and the guy from Chicago, Flaherty, nice man, everybody, terrific. Martin Starr has become like, on this show with Stallone, amazing. And John Daly's become very successful as a writer. I was with the younger kids. And then the other guys did quite well too, including Seth Rogen, who I just did, Platonic with, and he's done quite well. Anyway, anyway, that was a lot of fun, and I can't remember what led me down this path, but you'll rescue me.
That's all right. Yeah, no, I'll rescue Sam.
Okay.
Sam, just finishing up, my friend.
Yes, sir.
As we sit here in 2026, what would you say now is the state of the acting industry? Like we were chatting off air before we started recording.
Yeah,
we're now in an era of Disney, of Netflix, and me and Neil are big cinema goers. I have the pass where you can go as many times as you like. You pay a certain amount of money. It seems to me that the cinema industry, it's not dying. The film industry is far from dying. But I go to the cinema on a Monday. 2 weeks down the line, that film that I've seen on the cinema is on the TV.
It's on.
It's on home. Yeah, it's on home network. You can pay a certain amount of dollars, pounds, and you can watch it. In your opinion, Sam, how does the film and TV industry look in 2026? Is it healthy? Is there things you would change? Is it, I'm always interested, especially when I get to sit down and chat to people like you. Like you say, you've started a journey at a certain point, and here we are now at 2026. Right. How does the industry look in your eyes?
Well, I think the industry has changed within the last 5 years. I mean, for some reason, the work isn't here anymore. And I find that astonishing because not only do we have the places, we have the studios, but we have the people, whether it's hair, whether it's a grip, whether it's a set painter, whatever. And you have the actors, because it seems to me that everybody's looking for a fast buck. They always have been. But there's no studio system anymore. So let's go shoot it in Vancouver, or let's go shoot it in New York or Montreal. Or a friend of mine just worked with, run it. The guy who did King of Queens, Kevin.
Kevin James.
He just did a movie with him in Italy. But that's, they're in, they're out. They do their 4 weeks, they shoot their main principal stuff, and then they're gone. So there's nobody, or you go to New Mexico. But the truth is, whether it's New York, whether it's New Mexico, or whether it's Vancouver, all these places which are kicking back tremendous amounts of money to the studios to work, they will never see a dollar. They're just getting, they're not going to get paid back. It's not going to be equivalent as far as I can tell. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's all about, well, let's make this now and we'll worry about tomorrow. But I think that, and the problem
kind of is the YouTube era that we live in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think it's also that there's been this tremendous dismantling of the whole system. And the governor of California just doubled the amount of money that they will credit to somebody who's coming in to do a movie there. So it went from 350 million to 700 million, whatever it is, something like that. But I don't think it's necessarily sparked people saying, yeah, well, let's go back to Fox. Like I said, this nice studio called Radford, which is not far from where I live. I worked there many times. This guy bought it out and figured he'd make it back by blah, 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 by selling this and that and the other thing. Meanwhile, he's had to close it. So, wow. You've got this, this beautiful area, and you've got all these places that are ready-made, but nobody wants to really invest. They're just looking to make something today. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the answer to this is. To me, I think this is where where you wish you were younger than I am, because you go, well, in 20 years, maybe this will sort itself out. Yeah. But I worry for my daughter because she wants to be an actress, and she's a great singer and a wonderful actress and so forth. But, everything is in such flux that there's nobody who said, you know what, this is what we're going to do, and we'll be here for 20 years or more. You know, I mean, I'm not certainly not one to endorse the studio system, which was, you know, a kind of volunteered slavery, to quote a Roshan Roland Kirk tune. Anyway, but so I don't know what's going to happen, but I think out of the ashes, hopefully something will occur. But I mean, I watch stuff like you do. Like, did you watch Fallout?
Oh,
Yes.
Did you
yes.
get?
We get it.
I don't get it. I watched the first season. I was intrigued, but I've been watching this season, and I was talking to a friend. I said, I don't know what the fuck's going on.
That's the
What am
problem
I missing?
nowadays. That is the problem. I'm currently rewatching The Newsroom. That's and like West Wing and things like that because they're like
It's
my
interesting.
kind. Yeah, they don't make them kind of
Everybody
shows.
wants, you know, Martin Sheen to be the president instead of the guy they got in there.
Sam, I want my cat to be the president rather than the
Yes,
guy they've got.
indeed,
Yeah, let's
indeed.
say no more. Let's say no more, my friend.
No.
Sam, it's been an
Anyway,
absolute honor to
oh,
have you on our show, my friend. Honestly, when you got back to me and said that you would gladly do this, I was like, wow,
sure.
it was. Honestly, we can't thank you enough. We
Oh,
can't thank you for all the great characters you've given us over the years,
well, thank you.
whether it be from Kings and Queens, from Friends, from everything like that. It's an absolute, truly, me and Neil and Sasha, our other co-hosts, we say when we do this a lot, we're very humbled when we get to sit down and listen to people like you speak, my friend. It's good to see you still involved in the industry. Good to see you looking healthy and doing well, my man. You've forged out an incredible career for yourself. It's now amazing for us to sit down with the human being and just get a little insight into your world, my friend. We thank you very much, Sam. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much.
And let me know when you cut this together and you take out all the embarrassing stuff.
No, we'll leave it all in. Everyone's going to want to see this, my
Oh,
friend.
you're just going to leave it as is?
We'll leave it in. Everyone's going to want to see this, my
Well,
man. It's
that's the
going to
nice
be.
aspect of being 73. You just don't have to give a fuck anymore.
No, we don't. Honestly, like me, Neil, and Sash do this all the time. We don't give a fuck. It's just like we just get
Good.
on with it. We're just here to have fun, and honestly, we are truly humbled to meet someone like yourself, Sam. We wish you all the best for the future, my man.
Thank you so much. And stay in touch, will you?
100%, my man. We will
All
definitely
right.
stay in touch with you. Anyone who wants to check out our show that hasn't checked it out yet, just go onto YouTube, type in Completed It Podcast. We've got some great interviews on there.
Okay.
We have
Yeah,
one
I
of
was
the
looking at one. Yeah.
we've got some good stuff coming up. We've got one of the writers from Star Trek. He's just done the new Starfleet Academy series. He's on with us in the next coming days. We've got some really good stuff. Completed It Podcast on YouTube. You can find us on X at Completed It Pod,
Well,
Instagram
thanks for
Completed It
being
Podcast.
archivists. It means a lot, truly, and it's important, I think. So,
Thank you very much. That means a lot to us, man. Sam, take care of yourself, my friend. Keep in touch. We'll be back later in the week with another episode of Completed It. But till next time, everybody, stay safe.